Chosen one. There comes a strange moment on the path God calls you to when you realize that the more you grow, the less people seem to understand you. At first, it feels confusing. You try to explain yourself clearly, you move with good intentions, and you attempt to stay respectful and calm. Yet somehow the story others tell about you doesn't match the reality of who you are. People misread your silence as arrogance. They interpret your boundaries as attitude. They assume motives that never existed in your heart. And for a while, this can feel deeply discouraging, because most people are raised to believe that if you live correctly, others will automatically recognize it. But the journey of a chosen one rarely follows that simple script. The truth many people discover later in life is that misunderstanding is not always a sign you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it is confirmation that you are walking a road the crowd cannot easily explain. When you stop performing for approval and start living by conviction, the social categories people use to understand others begin to break down. Most environments run on predictable patterns. People are expected to react in certain ways, speak in certain tones, and follow certain unwritten rules that keep social life easy to interpret. But when you begin living according to the direction God places in your spirit, rather than the expectations of the room around you, those patterns stop fitting. Your silence looks unusual to people who depend on constant conversation. Your calmness during conflict looks suspicious to those who expect emotional reactions. Your boundaries look offensive to individuals who are used to unlimited access. The moment you step outside the script they recognize, confusion begins, and confusion often turns into misunderstanding. This is one of the earliest forms of separation God allows in the life of someone He is preparing for purpose. If your identity is built entirely on public opinion, every criticism will shake you. Every rumor will distract you. Every misunderstanding will tempt you to abandon the direction God gave you simply to restore approval. But when God begins shaping a chosen one, He often allows seasons where approval becomes unreliable. People who once understood you suddenly question you. Environments that once felt comfortable begin to feel uncertain. Through these experiences, God teaches you something deeper than popularity. He teaches you how to anchor your identity in Him rather than in the shifting opinions of others. Because once your identity rests in God's direction, instead of public understanding, misunderstanding loses its power to derail you. You begin realizing that clarity in your own spirit matters more than clarity in everyone else's perception. This realization changes the way you move through life. Instead of chasing explanations, you focus on obedience. Instead of defending every assumption people make about you, you keep walking the path God showed you. And that choice often creates even more confusion for those watching from the outside. When people expect long explanations and receive calm silence instead, they start filling the gaps with their own interpretations. When they expect emotional reactions and see steady composure instead, they start questioning your intentions. But chosen one, misunderstanding often increases precisely because you stopped performing for approval. When your life becomes guided by conviction rather than consensus, people who rely on social cues to understand the world struggle to categorize you. They cannot place you neatly into the roles they recognize. You are not competing the way others compete. You are not reacting the way others react. You are not chasing the same forms of validation that drive the environment around you. That difference creates tension because the human mind prefers simple explanations. If someone cannot easily categorize your behavior, they often create labels to restore their sense of order. They call you distant, cold, proud, or secretive, not because those labels are true, but because labeling reduces their discomfort. It allows them to explain something they do not fully understand. But the deeper reality is that chosen ones are often misunderstood early because their identity is being formed in a different place. God does not build your character inside the applause of the crowd. He builds it in quiet conviction, where obedience matters more than approval, and truth matters more than reputation. That process can feel lonely at times, but it also protects something essential. It ensures that when success finally appears in your life, it will not be built on the unstable foundation of public opinion. It will be built on obedience to God's direction. And that is why misunderstanding can sometimes be confirmation. It signals that your path is not controlled by the expectations of the crowd, but by a deeper calling that many people will only recognize long after the fruit of that calling becomes visible. Chosen one. Once you begin walking the path God placed in your spirit, instead of the path the world expects, misunderstanding almost becomes inevitable. The reason is not always hostility or bad intention from others. Often it begins with something much simpler. You are no longer following the script most people use to navigate life. Society operates on patterns that make behavior predictable. People look for approval from the group before they make decisions. They measure success by popularity, attention, or agreement from the crowd. When someone does something unusual, the first question many people ask is whether others support it. If the answer is yes, the action becomes acceptable. If the answer is no, the action becomes suspicious. This is the environment where consensus often replaces conviction. But chosen ones learn to move in a different way. Instead of waiting for the room to agree before they move forward, they begin trusting the quiet direction God places in their heart. They weigh decisions through prayer, reflection, and discernment, rather than through social approval. That difference alone creates confusion for people who rely on popularity as proof. When the crowd validates something, they assume it must be right. When someone moves without that validation, they assume something must be wrong. To them, obedience looks strange. It looks risky, stubborn, or even arrogant, because it refuses to rely on the same sources of approval they trust. But chosen one, obedience does not always make sense to people who live by consensus. When God guides someone to act in a way that contradicts the expectations of the environment around them, the crowd often interprets that obedience as rebellion. They cannot see the internal conviction that led to your decision, so they judge the decision based only on external behavior. This is why misunderstanding often increases as your faith and discipline deepen. The more your life is shaped by conviction instead of consensus, the more people who depend on social approval struggle to understand your choices. Another reason misunderstanding grows is that chosen ones eventually stop explaining themselves in every room they enter. Early in life, many people try to correct every false assumption about them. They feel responsible for making sure everyone understands their motives and intentions clearly. But over time, something shifts. Experience teaches them that not every misunderstanding can be solved through explanation. Some people are not confused because they lack information. They are confused because they already decided what they want to believe. When someone approaches you with a fixed narrative in their mind, even the clearest explanation may not change their perspective. Recognizing this reality creates a new form of wisdom. Instead of defending yourself endlessly in every environment, you begin conserving your energy. You explain when clarity truly matters, but you stop trying to control every opinion surrounding your life. You let time and fruit speak for you, rather than words alone. This decision can feel unsettling to people who are used to constant explanation. When someone refuses to defend themselves repeatedly, observers begin filling the silence with assumptions. The human mind rarely tolerates unanswered questions for long. If you do not supply the story, someone else eventually will. And those stories are not always accurate. But chosen one, allowing fruit to speak instead of arguments, requires patience. Growth takes time to become visible. Character takes time to reveal itself through consistent action. When people only see a snapshot of your life without understanding the process behind it, they may interpret your behavior through the lens of their own experiences. But the third reason misunderstanding appears is even more subtle. Your standards begin creating pressure in environments that were comfortable before you arrived. When someone lives with discipline, integrity, and restraint, it naturally exposes the excuses others rely on. Your calmness highlights their emotional instability. Your honesty highlights the compromises they made. Your focus highlights the distractions they accepted. You may never say a word about their behavior, yet your presence alone becomes a mirror that reflects things they would rather ignore. For some people, that reflection inspires growth. They see your example and begin asking themselves how they can improve. But for others, the reflection feels uncomfortable. Instead of confronting that discomfort, they look for ways to reduce it. The easiest way to reduce the pressure your example creates is through labeling. If they can redefine your behavior negatively, they no longer need to confront what it reveals about their own choices. Discipline becomes arrogance. Boundaries become attitude. Focus becomes coldness. By placing a label on you, they restore emotional balance for themselves. The label allows them to dismiss the standard you represent without examining it closely. This pattern appears in countless environments, where someone begins living differently from the surrounding culture. The more your life moves according to conviction rather than convenience, the more noticeable the contrast becomes. People who once felt comfortable around you start describing you with words that reduce the tension they feel. Those labels spread easily because they simplify a situation that is actually much more complex. But chosen one, something important happens during this stage of your journey. When people cannot categorize you through the scripts they understand, they stop searching for truth and begin attacking the narrative instead. They shift from asking questions to creating conclusions. They stop seeking clarity and start shaping the story in ways that make sense from their perspective. And that shift marks the moment when misunderstanding begins turning into something more intentional. Because once the story about you becomes more important than the truth about you, the reactions around your life begin escalating in ways that reveal far more about others than they ever will about you. Chosen one. When misunderstanding begins to grow around your life, it rarely stays at the level of simple confusion. Over time, it often evolves into something more complicated, something that reveals deeper emotions within the people observing you. The first stage of this escalation is usually projection. Projection happens when someone places their own feelings, insecurities, or doubts onto you instead of examining them within themselves. When a person feels uncertain about their own discipline, your focus may appear threatening to them. When someone feels insecure about their position in life, your calm confidence may feel like quiet judgment, even if you never intended it that way. Because the human mind often protects itself from uncomfortable self-reflection, it becomes easier to assume that the discomfort must be caused by someone else. So the statements you hear begin to reflect their internal struggles rather than your actual behavior. When someone claims you think you are better than everyone else, it often reveals that your growth has made them feel smaller in comparison. When someone insists that you must be hiding something, it sometimes means they themselves struggle with honesty and assume others operate the same way. Projection turns internal emotion into external accusation. It allows someone to avoid confronting their own insecurity by attaching it to your character. But projection alone rarely satisfies the discomfort people feel when they cannot control or categorize you. When misunderstanding remains unresolved, some individuals begin shaping a larger narrative around your life. This is where smear campaigns begin to appear. A smear campaign rarely starts with obvious hostility. Instead, it often arrives disguised as concern. Conversations begin appearing in places where your name surfaces unexpectedly. Someone mentions that they are worried about you or that they are confused by your recent behavior. They repeat interpretations that make your silence appear suspicious or your boundaries appear extreme. Because the tone of these conversations sounds calm or even sympathetic, others may initially believe the concern is genuine. But the purpose of a smear campaign is not clarity. Its purpose is narrative control. If someone cannot influence your behavior directly, they may try influencing how others perceive your behavior instead. Gossip becomes framed as observation. Speculation becomes framed as analysis. Slowly, the story about you begins traveling through social circles that never heard your side of the situation. And chosen one, the deeper reason behind this pattern is simple. When someone cannot control you, they try to control the story about you. The narrative becomes a tool that restores their sense of influence. By shaping how others interpret your actions, they create an environment where their version of events appears reasonable. But the escalation rarely stops with storytelling alone. Once a narrative has formed, many people begin testing the boundaries of your character. These tests often appear subtle at first. Small comments appear that carry hints of disrespect. Someone makes a remark that questions your motives, waiting to see how strongly you react. Another person may challenge your boundaries in minor ways, observing whether you remain calm or become defensive. These actions function as experiments. They are attempts to provoke an emotional response that confirms the narrative already spreading around you. If you react strongly, the reaction becomes evidence supporting their assumptions. If you become angry, they interpret it as proof that their suspicions were correct. This is why many of these tests involve bait. The goal is not resolution. The goal is reaction. They want emotional evidence they can point to when describing you to others. If they can trigger frustration or impatience, the story becomes easier to sell. They can say they tried to approach you respectfully, but were met with hostility. They can describe your reaction without explaining the pressure that caused it. In this way, the reaction itself becomes the final piece of the narrative puzzle. But chosen one, something deeper is also happening beneath the surface of these interactions. While some people participate in this escalation intentionally, others simply follow the emotional momentum created by the environment around them. Humans often mirror the tone of the groups they belong to. If a narrative spreads widely enough, individuals who once felt neutral may start interpreting your behavior through that narrative without realizing it. That is why misunderstandings can sometimes appear to multiply quickly. One conversation becomes several. One assumption becomes common language. The story begins repeating itself until it feels almost factual, even though its foundation was speculation. Yet within this difficult process, there is also a hidden purpose that God allows in the lives of chosen ones. Misunderstanding becomes a filter. It separates those who are genuinely interested in truth from those who are comfortable believing convenient stories. People who care about your character will eventually seek clarity rather than accepting rumors. They will observe your behavior over time rather than relying on second-hand opinions. But those who were never invested in your growth often accept the narrative quickly because it confirms the expectations they already carried. In this way, misunderstanding functions like a sieve that quietly removes certain people from your inner circle before your life enters a new level of visibility. God sometimes allows these seasons because elevation requires clarity about who truly belongs in your environment. If everyone who appears supportive during calm seasons remains during pressure, you might never recognize which relationships were built on convenience rather than conviction. Misunderstanding reveals that difference with surprising precision. Those who value truth remain patient. Those who value comfort with the crowd move away. And through this separation, your path becomes clearer, even if the process itself feels uncomfortable. In time, you begin recognizing that these escalations, projection, narrative attacks, and emotional tests are not signs that your direction is wrong. Often they appear precisely because your direction is steady. And once you understand this pattern, the most important question becomes how you respond, without allowing these pressures to pull you away from the integrity God is building within you. Chosen one. When misunderstanding grows around your life and the narratives about you begin to spread, the instinctive reaction for many people is to defend themselves immediately. The human desire to correct every false statement is strong because reputation feels deeply personal. When someone questions your character or distorts your intentions, the urge to explain everything can become overwhelming. Yet the strategy God often teaches chosen ones is very different from what the world expects. Instead of fighting every misunderstanding, He teaches you how to remain clean in your spirit, quiet in your responses, and consistent in your fruit. This approach does not mean you accept lies or allow disrespect to control your life. It means you recognize that not every accusation deserves your energy. When you attempt to correct every misunderstanding, you often become trapped inside endless debates that never produce clarity. People who are committed to misunderstanding you rarely change their minds through explanation alone. Their narrative already exists before the conversation begins. Engaging every accusation gives that narrative more attention and more momentum. This is why many spiritual teachers point to the example of Jesus, who was misunderstood repeatedly during his ministry. He was accused of motives he did not carry, questioned by people who had already decided what they believed, and criticized by crowds that misunderstood his purpose. Yet he did not spend his life defending himself in every conversation. His focus remained on obedience to God's direction, rather than approval from every audience around him. This example reveals a powerful principle. Obedience does not require universal agreement. Your responsibility is not to ensure that everyone understands you. Your responsibility is to walk faithfully in the direction God has given you. When you anchor yourself in that understanding, the pressure to manage every opinion begins to fade. Instead of explaining endlessly, you allow time to reveal your character. This is where fruit becomes your greatest defense. Fruit is the visible evidence of the life you are building. It appears through consistency, discipline, honesty, and the results that develop over time. Words can be twisted easily, but consistent character becomes harder to deny. When someone maintains integrity year after year, the truth eventually becomes visible regardless of the narrative surrounding them. God vindicates through fruit, not arguments. This does not always happen quickly. There may be seasons where misunderstanding appears stronger than truth, but time has a remarkable ability to expose the difference between performance and authenticity. The people who watch your life closely begin noticing patterns that contradict the stories they once heard. Your calm responses during conflict, your reliability in difficult moments, and your quiet discipline begin forming a picture that no rumor can fully erase. While fruit develops over time, wisdom also requires adjusting the level of access certain people have to your life. If someone repeatedly distorts your words or interprets your actions through suspicion, continuing to share personal details with them only creates more opportunities for misunderstanding. Tightening access is not revenge. It is discernment. You're not required to offer unlimited transparency to individuals who have already shown they are committed to distortion. Instead, you protect your next steps by sharing them with a smaller, trusted circle of people who have demonstrated respect for your character. This quiet boundary reduces unnecessary noise around your life and allows your focus to remain on the work God placed in front of you. In moments when communication cannot be avoided, calm responses protect your peace more effectively than emotional explanations. Short, grounded statements often carry more strength than long defenses. A simple acknowledgement that you heard someone's concern without agreeing with their conclusion prevents the conversation from escalating. When a statement about you is inaccurate, a clear correction, delivered calmly, establishes your position without inviting further argument. And when someone pressures you to reconsider a decision God already guided you to make, quiet confidence often speaks louder than debate. Saying that your decision stands communicates clarity without hostility. These responses keep your spirit steady while avoiding unnecessary drama. Yet protecting your outer environment is only part of the strategy. The inner environment of your mind and heart also requires care during seasons of misunderstanding. Constant criticism and speculation can create emotional noise that slowly drains your energy if you are not careful. This is why chosen ones must intentionally protect their spirit. Time with God becomes essential rather than optional. Prayer creates space where your identity is reaffirmed beyond public opinion.
Journaling helps separate facts from rumors, so your mind does not absorb every narrative surrounding you. Reducing exposure to social noise, whether through limiting certain conversations or stepping away from environments built on gossip, allows your mind to remain clear. These practices create a protective rhythm that keeps your focus anchored in truth rather than reaction. Discernment also becomes sharper during this season. Not every person who misunderstands you is acting with the same intention. Some people are genuinely confused because your growth changed the dynamic they once understood. Others may deliberately distort your actions for their own reasons. Learning to distinguish between confusion and malice helps you respond wisely. Someone who is simply confused may eventually understand your direction when time reveals the fruit of your choices. Someone who is malicious rarely seeks understanding at all.
Recognizing this difference prevents you from wasting emotional energy trying to convince individuals who never intended to listen. Through all of this, the central strategy remains remarkably simple, even though it requires deep patience to practice. Stay clean in your character. Stay quiet when unnecessary arguments appear. Stay fruitful in the work God placed before you. Over time, that combination becomes stronger than any narrative created against you. Because when God is shaping someone's life through obedience, the truth of that life eventually becomes visible even to those who once misunderstood it. And when that moment arrives, the respect that once felt distant often appears without you having to chase it at all. Chosen one. One of the hardest lessons on a spiritual path is learning that being misunderstood does not mean you are mistaken. Most people grow up believing that if they live well and explain themselves clearly, others will eventually recognize their intentions. But the path God often places before a chosen one does not follow the logic of the crowd. Obedience rarely looks impressive in the beginning. In fact, it often looks confusing, inconvenient, or even wrong to people who measure life through popularity and approval. When you choose conviction over consensus, your decisions begin to stand outside the familiar patterns people use to judge behavior. They may question your silence, your boundaries, or the direction you decided to follow. They may wonder why you do not react the way others react, or compete the way others compete. But this difference does not mean you are lost. Sometimes it means you are walking a road that fewer people recognize. Misunderstanding becomes part of the training God allows in the life of someone He is preparing for purpose. It teaches humility because you must remain respectful even when others misinterpret your actions. It teaches patience because truth often reveals itself slowly rather than instantly. And it teaches endurance because you learn how to keep moving forward without the constant reassurance of approval. These qualities are not developed easily during comfortable seasons. They are strengthened when you remain steady, even while the story about you is unclear. Through this process, your identity becomes anchored in something deeper than reputation. It becomes anchored in obedience. There is also another purpose hidden inside seasons of misunderstanding. They quietly remove the wrong audience from your life before elevation begins. People who only appreciate you when everything is easy often drift away when confusion appears. But the individuals who respect your character remain patient enough to see your fruit develop over time. God sometimes allows misunderstanding because it reveals who values truth and who only values convenience. The separation that happens during these seasons may feel uncomfortable, but it protects the environment around your future. Eventually, something interesting begins to happen. The same path that once looked strange starts producing visible results. Discipline creates stability. Patience creates growth. Quiet obedience begins shaping opportunities that others cannot easily ignore. When the fruit appears, the crowd often changes its perspective. Decisions that once seemed unusual suddenly look wise. The boundaries people questioned start looking like strength. But chosen one, you cannot wait for that moment to believe in your path. Your faith must remain steady even before recognition arrives. You do not need to be fully understood in order to remain obedient. God already knows your heart and the direction He placed inside you. When you continue walking with integrity, the truth of your life eventually becomes visible through your fruit. So if you are in a season where people misunderstand your choices, do not allow that confusion to shake your faith.
Stay patient, stay clean in your character, and stay aligned with God's guidance. If this message resonates with you, comment "obedient" as a declaration that you are choosing obedience over approval and continue walking forward with God, even when the crowd does not yet understand the road you are on.